Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something pretty fascinating. This really intense journey that young people are on when they aim for Wall Street careers.
Yeah, quite the scene.
You send over a bunch of great material articles, survey data, looking into it all.
Right.
And our goal here is pretty simple. We want to just boil it all down, pull out the key stuff for you, our listener.
And it's striking how much has shifted. One source mentioned, back in the late 80s, thinking seriously about finance careers. That didn't really kick in until like junior or senior year of college.
Feels like ancient history now, doesn't it?
Totally.
Because now it's just a completely different game. It's this mad rush for Wall Street talent starting unbelievably early, sometimes freshman year.
Right out of the gate.
And it's not just the big investment banks anymore, is it? They're fighting for these kids against hedge funds, private equity firms.
The PE shops that buy companies.
Those smaller, specialized boutique banks. And let's not forget the big tech companies.
Yeah, tech is a huge draw, too. It's a real battle for talent on campus.
It really is. And this super early push, it signals a big change in how these financial firms think about getting talent.
Definitely. They're not just waiting for the top seniors.
No, they're trying to spot them and lock them down way earlier. Maybe they're worried about losing out in this hyper-competitive market.
Exactly. Which brings us to the core questions, right? Why this crazy, early, intense chase? What's actually motivating these students, especially when they know how tough these entry-level jobs are?
Yeah, and do they really get what they're signing up for at, 19 or 20?
That's what we want to unpack in this deep dive.
Okay, so let's get into that early start. The game, as one source called it. It sounds like the heat is on from basically day one of freshman year.
Pretty much. If you're serious, you need to prep early for those vital internships.
The ones between sophomore and junior year.
Exactly. Those are crucial.
Because there's this real risk of feeling, left behind.
Yeah, that came up. If you don't figure out the recruiting game fast, the networking, the applications, the different roles, you could miss those early chances.
And that can really hurt your shot at getting a full-time offer later.
It absolutely can.
We even have this quote from a Wharton sophomore. Already has an internship lined up for 2026, by the way.
Wow.
And they said, it's kind of outrageous to basically have to pick your first job out of college when you're just 20.
That really hits home, doesn't it? The pressure.
It puts it right there. What was your take when you read that?
It just highlights this incredibly sped up timeline they're on. I mean, not long ago, these decisions happened way later.
Right.
And you have to wonder, do they even have time to explore other things before they feel kind of locked in?
Good question. And it shows how widespread this is. That Business Insider series interviewing hundreds of students.
Yeah, that was extensive.
It really drives home that this early, intense focus on Wall Street isn't just a few kids. It's a major trend.
So what's actually fueling this marathon? Why are they doing it?
Okay, let's talk motivations.
We got some interesting stuff from another Business Insider survey. This one targeted undergrad finance students, campus finance club members.
Right, about 150 responses from a dozen schools, plus 30 interviews from UPenn, Georgetown, NYU, places like that.
Now, the article is upfront. It's not like a perfectly scientific sample.
It's not nationally representative.
But it still gives us a pretty valuable look into what these students are thinking and what's driving them.
And what comes through loud and clear is this mix of complicated feelings. It's not just pure excitement.
No, definitely not. Some are genuinely buzzing about the challenge, the high stakes.
But
there's also a lot of underlying worry, anxiety about burning out, the sheer intensity of it all.
Interesting that it's not just rah-rah enthusiasm. What else do you think feeds that anxiety besides just burnout?
Well, I think it's probably beyond just exhaustion, maybe concerns about their personal lives, relationships, just general well-being.
Makes sense.
And it's such a competitive culture, right?
Yeah.
That constant pressure to perform must add stress. Plus, maybe some doubts about how fulfilling the actual day-to-day work will be, despite the prestige.
Absolutely. And they seem pretty skeptical, too, about Wall Street's promises to improve work-life balance.
Yeah, you get the sense they've heard that before.
Okay, the firms say they're making changes, but these students aren't entirely buying it. Do you think maybe they're too cynical? Maybe things are changing because the banks need this talent?
That's possible. There's definitely more noise about working conditions now. Firms know they have to compete.
Right.
But the core drivers of the business deals, markets, clients, that stuff often means intense work periods are just unavoidable.
Yeah.
So maybe some tweaks around the edges, but a total culture shift. That might take a while.
Which makes sense given the industry's reputation. But okay, even with these worries about workload and stress, the sources show a clear first choice for most of them: investment banking.
That's right. Even though we're seeing hedge funds and PE try to recruit earlier with their own programs, a huge majority in the survey, 74%, still plan to start in investment banking. Why do you reckon that still holds such sway?
Well, the thinking seems to be that IB is still ground zero. That's a quote from a Columbia junior.
Ground zero.
It's seen as the essential stepping stone to almost everything else in finance: hedge funds, private equity, private credit.
It opens the most doors later on.
That seems to be the consensus.
That Columbia student basically said IB is just the required first step for every other job in finance. It's like the boot camp.
Or finishing ground.
Yeah. And another student from Wharton talked about keeping options open. That's a big draw.
So it's strategic.
Totally. They said something like, if I like it, I can stay. If not, banking experience helps me get tons of other opportunities.
So it's a calculated play for many. Maybe not the dream job long term, but the necessary first step.
Seems that way. They appear willing to tolerate the initial intensity for those potential future rewards and options.
Which brings us squarely to the downsides they know about: the insane hours and the stress.
Yep, those were the top concerns by far in the survey. Those entry-level analyst and associate jobs in IB, notorious for 80, sometimes 100-hour weeks. And let's be real, it's not all high-flying deals. A lot of it is tedious tasks.
Like what?
Like hours spent perfecting PowerPoint slides, cleaning up Excel models, the grunt work.
You even see jokes about the junior banker lifestyle online, right? It's almost like a coping mechanism.
Kind of a dark humor, yeah. A shared understanding of how tough it is.
And even if they move later to the buy-side hedge funds, PE the hours might be a bit better.
But still way more than your typical 9 to 5.
Yeah, significantly longer.
And we can't ignore the serious side of this. That whole debate about working conditions blew up during the pandemic, right? With M&A booming.
Right, and then tragically, the death of that Bank of America associate last year.
Exactly. That really put a spotlight on things.
Yeah.
And yeah, banks like BofA, JP Morgan, they announced new guardrails trying to prevent burnout.
But the students, or at least the ones in these articles, they seem pretty unconvinced these changes are making a real difference.
There's definitely cynicism. Like that NYU junior who basically said the older generation decision makers, they went through it so they don't care about really changing the culture.
Wow, that's blunt. But is there any proof these guardrails are working? Or is it just PR?
It's probably too soon to tell, for sure. Firms are definitely feeling pressure to look like they're doing something.
Right.
But the fundamental pressures of the job haven't gone away. Client deadlines, deal sprints, those things are baked in. Real change probably needs more than just new policies on paper.
Seems likely. And then you have the other side, like that second NYU student.
Yeah.
Who kind of sees the long hours and tough tasks as a rite of passage. Like a negative form of giving back the old "I suffered so you should too" mentality.
It shows how entrenched that culture can be.
Yeah.
This idea of just paying your dues with sheer hours.
So, okay. They know the downsides. They're aware of the hours, the stress, the grunt work. So what really pulls them in? What are they truly seeking?
The Business Insider survey was pretty clear on this. 2 things stood out above all else for that first job.
Which were?
Number 1, compensation.
Money.
Yep. And number 2, exit opportunities. The potential for future career moves.
Let's talk comp first. Those entry-level salaries are pretty eye-watering, right?
Oh, yeah. Base salaries over $110,000, plus potential bonuses of $40K, $60K.
Compared to the average U.S. wage, that's huge.
Undeniably a massive draw.
And those exit opportunities, that's basically banking being a launch pad, right? Getting you into PE, hedge funds, maybe even starting your own thing later.
Exactly. It's about what doors that first job opens.
And this focus on money carries through to their long-term goals, too.
It seems so. The survey found financial freedom was the top long-term career goal for most of them.
And what about things like meaningful work or having control over your schedule?
Ranked much lower.
Yeah.
Significantly lower.
That might surprise some people outside finance. It really points to the financial rewards being the main engine driving these choices, at least initially.
It does. But it gets even more interesting when you look at their dream finance jobs in the write-in answers.
Okay. So the first job is IB, but the dream is different.
Often, yeah. A good chunk, 29 respondents, talked about entrepreneurship, running their own thing.
Or C-suite roles.
Right. Like CFO of a big company, chief investment officer at a hedge fund. big leadership positions.
And what about those buy-side jobs we keep mentioning? PE, hedge funds, venture capital.
Huge interest there.
Yeah.
85 respondents, that's like 57% of the write-ins, specifically mentioned the areas as their ultimate goal.
Wow. And how many mentioned wanting to stay in banking long-term?
Only 15.
15 out of roughly 150 write-ins.
Yeah, it's a stark contrast. It really paints IB as a strategic stepping stone for the vast majority, not the final destination.
Like a really intense, high-paying graduate program to get you ready for the next thing.
That seems to be the mindset for many. So they're largely willing to accept that initial grind.
Because they have a long-term vision focused elsewhere in finance, somewhere potentially more rewarding or fulfilling for them.
And we saw examples of students really articulating this acceptance, sometimes even embracing the difficulty.
Like that Wharton sophomore again, the one with the 2026 internship.
Yep. They said they welcomed the grind, believed the hard work would pay off.
A real belief in meritocracy there, or at least hoping the effort equals reward.
And then the NYU student with a sibling who'd already done banking seemed to just accept the tough model as the price of entry. Like, this is just how you get into the club.
Almost inevitable.
Yeah. But there's also realism, maybe even a bit of naivete, about what 100-hour weeks actually feel like.
The Georgetown student pointed that out, right? How hard it is for undergrads who maybe haven't even worked a 40-hour week to truly imagine 80 or 100 hours routinely.
It's abstract until you're living it.
Bill.
And then we saw a student who actively chose not to go into IB, went for asset management instead.
Why?
Specifically mentioned wanting to avoid the risks to their well-being, even used the phrase own mortality.
Wow, that's intense. Shows how serious the concerns are for some.
Definitely sobering. And finally, that other NYU student, the one heading into an IB internship this summer,
What about them?
they had this really clear plan to set boundaries, to prioritize their well-being.
How so?
Their stance was basically, no job should be killing its employees, regardless of pay or prestige.
So some are going in determined not to be consumed by it.
It seems like some are starting to think more critically about the personal cost and how they might manage it, even while being incredibly driven.
So pulling it all together, what we're left with is this really interesting paradox, isn't it?
Definitely. You've got these super ambitious, smart young people actively choosing a path known for being brutal,
Driven mostly by the money and the future doors it might open.
even though they know, or at least have heard about, the significant personal costs.
Yeah.
So does this answer our question about why the mad rush? Seems like it leans heavily towards a strategic, money-focused calculation with known risks attached.
Right. And for you listening, hopefully you now have a clearer picture of what's driving these students, what they expect, and the very real anxieties they're carrying into these careers. So do they really grasp what they're signing up for? It feels complicated.
It is. Some seem pretty clear-eyed. Others maybe won't fully get the reality until they're deep in it.
Which leads to a final thought, maybe something to chew on.
Yeah.
Considering all this super early, intense focus on one specific high-pressure career, what does that mean for the wider economy? And what about the long-term futures of these individuals beyond just hitting those initial financial targets? Is this whole model sustainable for them and for the industry?
Or will we see future generations start prioritizing different things, a different kind of balance maybe?
Definitely a lot to think about.